You are listening to the Ready PDM Network.
This episode is brought to you by Under 10 Consulting. For many organizations, it seems products get released by individual heroics. Yet most organizations need a small number of living documents, fewer than 10, to manage their products and services. Contact Under 10 for a product playbook designed specifically for your organization.
Are you ready?
Most of the businesses I've seen, when they talk about Agile, it's purely about the kind of software development piece of it.
I am with Jeff Lash. He is the key ingredient to kicking off this amazing event today with probably over 400 or 500 people. Jeff, this has been a culmination of months in the works. Tell me about your excitement and energy today. What are you most really focused on and having everybody take away from this today?
Yeah, well, it's great. It's been a lot of work, and so it's nice to finally see it come together. I'm excited. I'm hoping that I actually get a chance to actually go to some of the sessions, and I'm not dealing with all the administrative work. I'm also going to be presenting, but I think it's a great opportunity for people just to come together. The fact that we've got this many people that are willing to give up a Saturday and come out. Mm-hmm. We've got people from big companies, small companies, technology, manufacturing, services.
And probably the way you followed me, and a lot of people know me, is from a blog I have written for almost 10 years now, actually, called How to Be a Good Product Manager.
Welcome to St. Louis. I'm Chelsea, and I'm proud to call the St. Louis area my home. There's plenty to see and do in this metro area of nearly 3 million people.
When you think about what requirements are, these are the necessary capabilities that we need to have in the product in order for it to be commercially successful.
Soylent Green is made out of people.
Soylent Green is people!
So, I think in some areas there are definitely some good practice, some best practices emerging. I think in some areas it's still, there's a lot of questions up in the air.
Surely you can't be serious.
I am serious. And don't call me Shirley.
Hi, I'm Jessica from our editorial team. I'm here with Brad from marketing to recap day one of Serious Decisions Summit 2014.
Are you ready?
Hello, Ready Product Radio heads, and welcome to another exciting episode of Ready Product Radio. Our guest this week is Jeff Lash, the man behind the very popular blog, How to Be a Good Product Manager. I have been reading Jeff's blog for over 10 years, and I'm a huge fan. Jeff and I talk about all things Agile, specifically critical success factors for working with dev, marketing, as well as user experience staff. Ready Product principle number 3 is to be good at product, be good with people. Product management is like Soylent Green. It's people. Enjoy the show. Jeff Lash, welcome to Ready Product Radio, and thank you for taking the time to speak with us. This is a real treat for me, Jeff. We haven't met before, but I've been following you for a long time online in the various product management communities. For those who might be listening who don't know you, maybe you could start by giving yourself an introduction for us.
Yep, good to talk to you and good to be here. So right now my work is I work at Serious Decisions. Serious Decisions is the world's leading research and advisory firm that helps organizations, B2B organizations, grow, and we do that by working with sales, marketing, and product groups within those organizations. So I'll tell a little bit more about that in a minute, but I've been in product management for pretty much product management or product development in some form for pretty much my entire career. And probably the way you followed me, and a lot of people know me, is from a blog I have written for almost 10 years now, actually, called How to Be a Good Product Manager. So it started as just a way for me to kind of share some of the things that I was learning and express my thoughts, and it ended up being a great way for me to connect with other people in the community. And back when there weren't many product management blogs out there, there was a few others before I started, and but it's been a great way to kind of express my thoughts and share some of the things that I've learned along the way.
Yeah, in 10 years, that's amazing. And you're right, that's definitely where I started to follow you. So thank you for that. So Ready Product Radio podcast is about helping people of all disciplines be ready for the many challenges that they will face in their product journeys, Jeff. So when I looked at some of the things that you've been blogging and talking about lately, I thought there's 3 topics that we might cover today. One is critical success factors for product management working with Agile. dev team. I saw a recent post that you did that talks about Agile, and then you also, secondly, you did a post on what does marketing do when product goes Agile, which I thought maybe we would touch as well. And then just to round it out, maybe as a third topic, I thought we'd get your thoughts on how to position user experience within that kind of team dynamic, and get any best practices or recommendations you have there. Do those three topics sound good to you?
Sound great. Yeah, absolutely. We've been getting a lot of interest and having a lot of discussions lately about those.
Awesome. So let's dive in with Agile. What have you seen? I just to give it some context, I was at a product camp in Ottawa recently, and I actually ended up giving the main talk there in terms of got the most votes. And my topic was, is Agile killing the product manager? And a bit of that was sticker bait, to be honest. I really wanted to talk about, have we reached a point where we have best practices for how product plugs into an Agile development team? And I was intrigued to see that you've been blogging about this lately. So what have you seen? Are there any best practices evolving? Has this been kind of gelled and settled, or are we still figuring out how to work together? What do you think?
Yeah, so it's definitely an interesting area. And for me personally, it's interesting. I worked the first Agile project I worked on personally was probably around 2004, 2005. So I've been, personally doing it for about 10 years, but there's still a lot of people that just now in 2015 or 2016 are, encountering it for the first time.
Mm-hmm.
So I have a lot of experience. And then also, at Serious Decisions, what we do is we work with B2B organizations and help product management leaders and product management teams improve their performance. And I'd say the majority of the clients I work with are either using Agile or trying to use Agile or interested in some way in Agile. Certainly a lot of those are software companies, but we're even seeing it in more traditional industries, advanced manufacturing, where they're building software on top of hardware and things like that. So, I think in some areas there are definitely some good practice, some best practices emerging. I think in some areas it's still, there's a lot of questions up in the air. But one of the things that we've been really focused on and doing research and writing about is, when you move to Agile, what does that mean for product management? Because I think that's really what's missing. A lot of people, when they decide they're going to go Agile, especially large organizations that are making the transition from waterfall to Agile, when they decide to make the switch, it's very much a development-driven approach, and the focus is very much on the tactical mechanics of Agile. And I'll say it's most specifically Scrum. I mean, Agile is an umbrella term, but most people I talk to who are using Agile are basing it around the Scrum methodology. So they spend a lot of time on, here's how to do a stand-up, and here's how to write a story, and here's how to, organize the story card, and how you should select your sprint, things like that. And those are all really, obviously important things that you need to do to follow some of the methodologies. But what they lack is they focus just on what happens in that Scrum team, right? It's about what happens at the stand-up. How do you sit together during the day? How do you review acceptance criteria, manage the backlog, things like that. What they don't recognize is the fact that there's this entire universe of product management that happens outside of the Scrum team. And I think that comes from when you look at the people who started the people who wrote the Agile Manifesto and created a lot of those processes. They were initially really focused on custom software development. It was, I need to build a custom piece of software for my HR department, or I'm contracted by a company who's paying me money to build some system for them. And I think the way a lot of these Agile methodologies were designed is around that use case. And I think, Agile works really well in those situations. When you then start talking about how do we use Agile for revenue generating commercial software, and I say software because that's mostly where it's used. It's different. There's a blog post I wrote. I think the title was, Agile is not a product management framework. And it's been one of the most popular posts on our blog. I mean, our blog gets the Serious Decisions blog gets a pretty good amount of traffic, anyways. But this has been one of the most popular posts. It's still one of the most popular, even 2 years after I think it was released. And the point I was making is that, Agile, love it or hate it, Agile is not a product management methodology. And that's when I talk to clients, that's really what resonates with them. They say, yeah, we sent our people to Agile training. They're now called product owners and they're supposed to be writing stories, whatever, but we're having problems with roadmaps. We're having we're not sure where, we don't have a roadmap beyond the next 3 sprints, or, sales is complaining because they don't know what's coming down the pike, or marketing's confused because they're not sure what's getting released and when, or things get pushed out by engineering and, we have no idea that they're happening, and customer service isn't prepared and things like that. So, we at Serious Decisions, one of the things we've been focusing on is how does product management need to adapt in an agile environment? And I think, when you talk about what are some of the critical success factors, I think it's realizing what changes with product management, but also what stays the same. And I've seen a lot of companies where, they say, oh, we're agile now, and they just throw everything out the window. And it's like, well, no, you still need to do, you still need to have a business plan for the product. Maybe the business case is going to be a little bit different. Maybe it's not, an old situation where we spend 6 months writing a business case before we do anything, but you still have to have a sense for what's the value proposition, who are the buyers, what's the market for this, is there an opportunity? I've heard a lot of people say, we're agile, we don't do requirements. And we've got some good research, and I've actually given a presentation at a number of different product camps on this idea of how do requirements fit into agile. And when you think about what requirements are these are the necessary capabilities that we need to have in the product in order for it to be commercially successful. And if you start an agile project, if you start developing software and you're not sure what those things are, lean isn't going to help you with that. Agile is going to help you with that. Waterfall is not going to help you. That's just hardcore fundamental product management work. Now, the difference is, I think when people think of requirements, they think of these 100-page documents that have, the system shall, blah, 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 going on ad nauseum. Well, when we talk about requirements, we talk about, what are the capabilities? Market requirements are things like, what's the competitive environment? What are the market segments we're going to approach with this? So you need to have some sense of that. You don't, in Agile, you don't need to have 100% of that lockdown, certainly. But I think it's this idea of I use the metaphor of a pendulum. Like the pendulum was all the way in one direction to waterfall, where you had to have every pixel figured out before you started. And then the pendulum swung all the other way to like, oh, we're agile. We don't need roadmaps. We don't need requirements. We just start writing stories, and we don't need to do research. Let's just, at the end of a sprint, we'll show it to a customer. And I think, in our view, the pendulum's somewhere in the middle. And I think a lot of companies have recognized that. Larger companies, are in that pendulum swing somewhere on that spectrum. I think smaller companies, newer companies, SaaS companies, I think out of the gate tend to be a little bit more measured and they understand the balance of these things. And I think, in their case, they're not trying to change a process. They're trying to just institute a process for the first time.
Yeah, no, that's good stuff. So what, let's unpack what you were saying there a little bit. So do you think that it's as simple perhaps as taking the traditional role of the product manager and just now saying that rather than the product manager working with the dev team, they now have a single point of contact, which is the product owner? Or is that too much of a simplification, do you think?
Well, in a lot of organizations, that has been the case for a while. It was the dev team worked with the product manager as their single point of contact, whether or not there were multiple other, external stakeholders. I mean, usually, even if you've got a product manager, you got the CMO, the CEO, business unit heads, whatever, who are all weighing in. I think one of the things that we're seeing is, certainly this role of product owner is adding an additional question into the mix, which is, can one person be both the product owner as Scrum describes it, writing stories, doing backlog, sitting with the dev team, and can that person also be doing the product management activities? Now, again, a lot of the, Scrum, Agile training, those sort of folks really don't focus on that because in their mind, they're not thinking about, and no offense to them, they're not thinking about, all the other things they need to have. They're not thinking about, competitive analysis, writing a business case, doing product, pricing, managing relationship with sales, things like that. So we created one of the questions we've been getting a lot is, can one person and should one person be both the product owner and the product manager? You need to have two people do that. And that's a question I think that's been debated hotly. And it was interesting because, again, I've had a lot of experience with this, and we've had a lot of experience with clients. There's definitely people out there saying, oh no, you have to have the same person be both, right? There's no way a product can succeed without that, because all the details matter. So you can't kind of separate the technical stuff from the bigger product picture. And there's some people who are saying there's no way that one person can do all this because it's way too much work, right? If you try to do all of it, then you spend all your time putting out fires with the dev team and you never talk with the market.
Exactly.
So what we did was we looked at all, we kind of, to use your one, we unpacked it a little bit and looked at what are all the different factors. And the reality is there is no one size fits all. So we created what we call our product ownership framework, decision framework. And basically it looks at a series of different factors for you to determine, should one person do both or not. So for example, if you have a team that is really completely new to Agile and Scrum, they're going to need a lot of hand-holding. They're going to probably need the product owner there in person or remotely in person in real time a lot. If you have a team that's really experienced with it, you probably don't need the product owner co-located or even available 8 hours a day. If you have a product in the market, there are a lot of responsibilities that product managers have in terms of supporting marketing, supporting sales, customer service, things like that. Versus if you're developing a new product, you don't have as many of those. I mean, certainly you need to prepare the product for launch, but you don't have those day-to-day in-market responsibilities. So we actually have, I don't know, Alan, if you can put a link to it, but we have a version of that we've made available for people to download so they can kind of look through the different decision factors. And the feedback we've gotten from people is that this is really helpful because, again, the advice or what they've heard is kind of, completely on one side or the other. And so when we look at the different factors, it helps people figure out, which situation is right for me or my product. And then the other point is, regardless of which approach you approve or which approach you implement, there's things you got to keep in mind to make it successful. It's not like just making one person play both roles is magically going to work. There are challenges. So part of the things we do is we help companies say, look, for example, if you have one person playing both roles, then you need to have a backup strategy for when that product manager goes out in the market and does customer research or goes out on sales calls, right? You're just saying the product manager is going to be out for a week. The dev team then is saying, well, who's going to do it? So for example, we say, look, can you have someone be the stand-in product owner in your absence? Maybe that's a business analyst. Maybe that's a user experience person. So you have to have strategies like that in place. I think because it's not just magically one will work, and there's pros and cons to both approaches.
Yeah, no, that's good stuff. A couple other things, and then we'll move on to our second topic. What do you say or hear? When people are saying that Agile is more than just about software delivery, because I hear that one a lot. I don't know if you do, but in other words, there's people that have read the Agile Manifesto and maybe even looked at specific methodologies like Scrum and basically say this is about the whole business. I don't know about you, but I haven't seen many businesses that have adopted Agile. Maybe manufacturing talks about lean, but what do you say to people that say, no, Agile isn't just about software delivery? Do you agree with that or no?
So I think it can be, as you mentioned, as you implement it, but I agree with you. Most of the businesses I've seen, when they talk about Agile, it's purely about the kind of software development piece of it. So, when we advise our clients and we're talking about it, I mean, that's the people that we're mainly referring to. Is they say, look, we've been doing waterfall development, it's not working, or we're trying to do Agile. They need help kind of fixing that part of the thing. I have seen some organizations, and I have heard of companies that are trying to kind of create Agile organizations, right? Where the not just the Scrum practices, but kind of the Agile philosophy permeates throughout the entire organization. I think those are definitely fewer and far between, tend to be smaller companies, tend to be newer companies. And I think, in that case, there's a different set of considerations and challenges. So in that case, it's not about, how do we get the product manager and product owner and dev team working together? It's how do we apply, this to HR? Or in our world, we have a lot of clients that are applying Agile to the marketing organization. So not, about how do we apply Agile concepts when we're doing demand creation or campaigns or things like that. But I agree with you. I think most of the time when I'm on the phone with a client or with, a prospect and they're talking about their challenges with Agile, I'd say 98% of the time it's, using it for, the product development piece specifically. We do have some research. We have done some work and looked at, how can you apply Agile concepts in other areas of product management? So for example, taking an Agile approach to creating personas, or an Agile approach to competitive analysis or things like that. So outside of kind of that core center product development, but applying Agile across the broader product management framework. And I think there are definitely some clients and some people I've met who are, trying to do that. But, that's different than saying that's kind of maybe a baby step towards let's apply Agile across the whole company.
Yeah. Okay, good. Well, that's probably a good time to transition, Jeff, into our second topic, because you were just mentioning marketing. So yeah, I saw your recent post and was quite intrigued by it. What is marketing to do when product goes agile? So I thought we could tackle that second. So, just to introduce the topic, I know that there's a tension because marketing can be one of those functions that prefers to be waterfall. In other words, they plan out their year, maybe based on your industry. You've got a certain annual cycle. You have to have a trade show, and it's always in September, for example. So they need to be able to do some longer term planning, but then the product group may be running in an agile fashion. So is that some of the tension that you wanted to unpack with that post?
Yeah, I think I'll kind of split it into two areas. Like I said just a minute ago, I think there's what does the marketing organization do when the product development is done agile, and then there's the separate piece of how is it. What about agile marketing, which is a whole topic in and of itself, which is applying agile principles in the marketing organization. But that first one is really the one where some of this stemmed from. And again, I'm looking at the blog post I think came out about 2 years ago, and it's still one of the most popular ones because it's still a thing we're struggling with. And this actually came from talking with some of my colleagues who joined Serious Decisions, but also hearing this from a number of clients. We have a number of different practices within Serious Decisions that work with different parts of the sales and marketing and product organizations. And it was, for a while, it was anytime anyone mentioned Agile, they kind of came to me and said, all right, someone has a question. And what we were finding is a lot of the questions were around, hey, from marketers, from product marketers, from demand marketers saying, all right, we've now switched to Agile. It's throwing all these problems. Or colleagues of mine are saying, I worked in a company that was doing Agile and it was just a big mess. And I think what I realized is that a lot of the complaints that marketers had that they were describing were completely legitimate, but they were complaints based on poor implementations of Agile. It was, the people saying, oh, well, the engineers would just push a release out to production and they wouldn't tell marketing about it. So we'd start getting calls from customers about this new release and we had no idea that it was happening. Well, in my mind, that's not an Agile problem. That's just a bad, poor coordination problem. And again, I think when you look at a lot of the books and the literature, kind of the traditional stuff on Agile, it doesn't talk about marketing at all. And I don't fault those folks for it because they're mainly, software development folks. But what we're realizing is there's this big missing piece of when, your product development approach goes Agile, how does marketing, what is marketing supposed to do? And, a lot of times people are confused or they're ignorant of it, like, oh, that won't impact us, or they've heard bad stories from other people, so they try to sabotage it. And again, the reality is, I think there's certain things that stay the same and certain things that change, and so that's really what that blog post was trying to get to. And again, a lot of what some of our research that we've done really goes around that. And this is a challenging area because getting Agile sorted out just within the Scrum team sometimes is a big enough challenge. And then you start adding in marketing on top of it. But, we have seen organizations do a good job. And I think one of the things, probably that's most important here is a strong connection and strong alignment between the product manager, and the product marketer. And I'd say if you have a product owner, then definitely those three people as well. And because a lot of what we're talking about is, clarity around what's the roadmap, what are our releases, what's our value proposition, who is this targeting, and Agile is intended to be fluid and have some agility built into it, but again, there's also some planning that needs to be involved. I like to use an example as if we know that the top priority for our customers is improved security, then that might be a release theme that we're going to focus on for the next 3 months. I don't need to wait until a week before the release to tell that to the product marketers, right? Product marketing actually should be involved in the research and say, hey, look, buyers are looking for better security. We have a good opportunity in the market to go against this competitor. So that's going to be the focus. That, and a high level understanding of what, when we say security, what does that mean? What's the value and what things we're going to focus on? That's enough for marketing to get going and start developing. Certainly they'll have personas. They can start develop some messaging and competitive positioning and even sales tools and things like that. They don't need to know exactly what the feature is going to look like or exactly what, is it a drop down or a text box or things like that. And I think that's the challenge for marketers. A lot of marketers are used to saying, all right, I'll wait till I get that PRD. The PRD is going to be 100 pages and it's going to have screenshots of everything. And then I'll start doing my job. And, but I can't do anything before then. And I think, our message for marketers is like, well, you shouldn't need to wait for that. So you need to be comfortable with some level of ambiguity, but again, you should get some of those basic things locked down. And the message for product managers is, you're agile, but if you don't know what your top priorities are for the next release or your top priorities for customers are, then you're not doing a good job planning. So it's kind of that getting that balance right in terms of some level of planning and themes and things like that, but also not, so allowing yourself to be agile and not locking down too many of the details up front.
Yeah, that's interesting. And do you have any examples, that you've seen, more recently in terms of an actual agile marketing group? Because I've certainly never seen that. And now I more traditionally work with larger B2B organizations. So I imagine just like any department, marketing is very agile in smaller organizations. But have you seen any marketing organizations specifically go after saying, listen, we need to become more agile and having some success like that?
Yeah, we definitely have. I mean, over the past few years, there's been more and more companies that we've run into that are, applying agile practices within the marketing organization. So, I'd say, maybe initially it was smaller companies, but, I can think of one example specifically where it was a guy who came from maybe a medium-sized company who had some experience with Agile, and it was because the development team used Agile, and he learned about it there, and then went to another company and applied it to a larger organization. I think they're still the minority, but for example, I mean, there are marketing teams I've seen where they have their daily stand-up and they have their cards, and it's a little bit different, right? Because in many cases, it's not product owner versus developer. It's all right. We as a marketing team are saying, all right, I'm gonna this week we're going to, write this campaign, write this email that's part of this campaign, or we're going to, get the persona developed or things like that. So you're kind of taking the agile project management approach and applying it within the marketing activities. But I think definitely there is, a bigger shift probably away from, on January 1st, we know every single tactic we're going to do for the entire year, and more towards, all right, we have an idea of the campaign that we're focusing on for this year, next year, and maybe we have a good idea of the market segments we're going to focus on for the first 3 to 6 months, but the specific details get sorted out, and the clients I've talked to, at least that are applying agile within marketing, having good experiences and good success. I think. It's a challenge because again, if you read a lot of like the books on agile, it's really geared more towards software development. But there's certainly a lot of people I've seen that are applying these things within marketing.
Yeah. So a couple of things resonate there. One is maybe one thought is that as social media and more dynamic targets, shall we say, target vectors, become more dynamic for marketing, maybe it makes a lot more sense for them to go agile. So I'm thinking about, for example, when I started getting into enterprise software in the 90s, there was the annual trade show, and that was the anchor for marketing for the year. And now, as you know, you're an expert at this. Now it's much more about blog posts and about social media and about those types of things. So, do you think maybe that has part of it as well? That maybe marketing, the landscape is becoming much more friendly to Agile.
Yeah, I certainly think that's part of it. I mean, you're right. I mean, there's certain industries where they moved away from those. Although, I mean, there's still a lot of industries where stuff is still centered around those big annual events.
Yeah.
I think part of it may be, and I don't know this for sure, but part of it might be, the marketing cadence was based off the product cadence, right? When you did waterfall and you had one release a year or two releases a year, then that was when you did your big marketing push.
Mm-hmm.
So, now that you have the flexibility to do releases more frequently and more in smaller increments, that gives marketing some more flexibility.
Mm-hmm.
One of the things we're writing about, we have a research brief that talks about Agile implications on launch. And one of the things we introduced there is this idea of bundling, right?
Mm-hmm.
What I see a lot is product people saying, all right, we're doing 2-week sprints or 4-week sprints, and we want to do a release at the end of every sprint. And marketers are saying, okay, that's great. We know about it, but there's not a whole lot here in this in this release for us to market. And the product people are like, but this is a big release. We got to make a big splash about it. And the marketers are saying, this is not a big deal. You got some bug fixes. You got a couple new features. Okay, that's great. So, one of the things we advise companies in that situation is this idea of bundling. So, maybe you do a release, a launch every month with some minor functionality, but every quarter you're going to kind of bundle up those things and then really do a larger marketing push around it.
Mm-hmm.
But in a way, I think that's good because it gives marketers more flexibility. You're not tied again to that static release schedule. I think you're right. I mean, there's also things like just the tactics that you're using, right? When launch used to be around putting an ad in a trade publication that only was available in print, you had to. There was the deadline to get the ad submitted. There was the deadline to get the final copy to them, right? So you needed to know exactly what the ad was going to look like 3 months before it hits the shelves or whatever. Well, now you can, in the morning figure something out and launch it in the afternoon. So I think that has certainly added some flexibility. That being said, a lot of the standard stuff like, what's our messaging and positioning and value proposition, that shouldn't be changing every day or every week, certainly. But I think that the tactics is particularly like for demand creation, that the tactics have, there's a lot more flexibility. And I think that's probably might be where some of the folks I know who are applying Agile in marketing, that's what they're doing. They're saying, all right, let's do an AdWords test this week, right? Let's do it this sprint, and then let's monitor it for the next sprint and then see if we want to do it or not. Or, hey, we're going to do this. We're going to do a webcast and see if the webcast gets traction. If it does, then we'll launch a couple more. If it doesn't, we'll change it. I think that sort of flexibility. And I think, I don't know if that's really Agile, or just more of a kind of experimentation culture that's really seems to be taking hold.
Yeah, definitely. And A/B testing and things like that. So Jeff, I want to respect your time here. So why don't we move on to our third topic? I didn't want to leave user experience out of our discussion. Hopefully you and I will have a couple more discussions because there's a lot to go through here. But I wanted to understand, so we've talked about at the beginning product management and how they work with the Agile dev team. Again, it's been a change since I started in product management. I'm not sure about you. User experience has really become kind of the third leg to the stool, if you will, as its own domain that is critically important. Everything is about the experience these days. So can you talk a bit about what you see as best practices or successful practices around, how user experience fits in the dynamic between product management and development?
Yeah. So also this is kind of a personal area of interest for me because before I moved into product management, I worked in user experience. So
great.
For me, the connection was always very natural. But at the time when I started in product management, it was kind of a very novel thing like, oh, someone from user experience is becoming a product manager. Now that's like the ideal skill set is someone with both of these things.
Right.
So yeah, I mean, to me, the connection always seemed very natural. I mean, it's maybe it's two sides of the same coin or whatever metaphor you want to use. Definitely, the organizations that we see that are performing really well have a tight connection between user experience and product management. I'd say maybe 10 years ago, it was common for user experience to be reporting up through development. Now, much more often, I'm seeing user experience reporting up through product or reporting up through, maybe sometimes marketing, but usually product or some kind of separate organization. And I think that reflects the fact that UX is now recognized as not just UI design, not just, okay, hey, we've already decided the features that we want to build. We've already built the software. Now just make it look pretty. I think there's a recognition that it's more than that. And I think that the organizations that I've seen that are most effective have a tight connection between the UX person and the product manager, and that connection exists throughout the entire product lifecycle. So actually another presentation I've given at a number of product camps that's gotten a lot of good response and interest is kind of this topic of sorting out product management and user experience. And one of the things I do sometimes is I do a little quiz where I take excerpts from job descriptions and I ask people to tell me, is this a product manager or is this a UX person?
Oh, nice.
Usually there's about 50 to 60% success rate, because there are some things that are very similar, and that's kind of the point. Is there's a lot of similarities. And there are some companies where that's the stuff we're helping them with. They're saying, well, the product people are saying, well, we own the requirements and we own the user personas, and people say, no, we do user personas, we do user research, or is it user research versus market research, things like that. So, but in my mind, those are actually good questions to have. Those are good challenges. The organizations that really worry me is where they don't have a UX function, or they have a UX function and it's viewed as just completely end of the process. I think when I see companies where they're talking about, how can we better work together in the early stages, that to me is a good sign. There's still some things that need to be unpacked. And again, one of the things we help with is kind of roles and responsibilities. So, who should be responsible for this? Who should be accountable? And I think in particular, one of the things we emphasize is more UX involvement earlier in the stages. And you talk to any UX person, they'd argue that as well. Sometimes that's a bit of a new concept for product managers who are not used to it. But I think once they work with a good UX person, they realize the value they can add in those early stages. I think they realize the benefit and the competitive advantage that you can get from it.
What? So talk to me specifically about because I'll use myself as an example. I'm in a situation right now where I don't have user experience on our team. So I kind of have to represent that a little bit, and I leverage my sales team and support and whatnot for that. But so how do they typically work? So you say involved through the entire life cycle. So, for example, let's say at the very beginning you're thinking of a new feature, or a new set of features. What's a user experience doing at that user experience person doing at that stage?
Yeah. So in that, I'd say in that situation it might be, well, how do we know that that's a feature that we should be doing, right? So maybe it's, we've done some user research. The UX people have gone out and done observational research or contextual inquiry or usability tests, and found that, hey, this is, something that might be useful. One of the things, as an example, what I did when I was in UX is we used user experience to do competitive analysis. So we said, okay, hey, we know that customers need to do this task. Let's look at how the other products do it. And we did essentially usability testing on competitive products. So we said, okay, not to say that we want to copy those exactly, but we want to understand what do they do well and what do they not do well. So that helped us understand, help the product manager understand what specific features do we need, how those, what are the capabilities and the constraints around those. And then from a design perspective, then we can say, okay, we know that, competitor A does it this way and competitor B does it this way, and here's the way we think we can do it better. So, I think that's one thing. The companies that I think are really on the forefront of this are doing a lot of, that hands-on, in-person observational research. And for example, one of the tips I like to give people is, observational research can be extremely beneficial and powerful. But if you've never done it before, you can do it poorly and wrong. And a lot of UX people have experience, they have training, they've done it before. So a great way to start is, having a UX person kind of lead some sort of ethnographic research study and have the product manager tag along. And you get 2 sets of ears, 2 sets of eyes, one person can lead, one person can take notes. And that's a great way to learn how to do it, but also to just get some additional benefit from it. And those are the sorts of activities that I think can add a lot of value. For people like you, and there's a lot of companies I've run into that don't have that. Sometimes you're trying to do some of it yourselves, and some product managers can and some can't. I think the bigger challenge comes in the design phase when you say, all right, I'm supposed to do all these product management things, but also someone's got to do the wireframes and figure out what the screen actually looks like. And there's some product managers that are really good at that sort of work, and that's nice. But then, I like to say every hour you spend doing that is an hour you're spending not doing something else that's part of your job. And then, again, sometimes development can do that, but more often than not, I find that developers don't have the design skills and experience, or they design things because it's easy for them to develop, not because it's the best way for users to use it. So, again, I'd say 5-10 years ago, maybe there was a fight for why is UX needed. Now, I think in most of the organizations we work with, there's a recognition that it's a crucial part of modern product development.
So one more question before we leave this topic then. So the other concept I've heard bandied around, Jeff, is this concept of customer experience. So, and I'll give you some context there. It's the idea of saying, well, really, when my customer calls for support, or when my customer is going through the a purchase decision, or when my customer is paying their their invoice. In other words, anytime my customer touches my organization, I need to manage that experience. Have you seen many companies taking the user experience concept and basically trying to apply it more broadly to the entire experience of a customer with their organization, as opposed to just the product?
So we actually have one of the practices we have at Serious Decisions includes a focus on customer experience.
Okay.
I'd say, but it's interesting though. There's definitely companies that are doing that, and it's definitely important and valued. The interesting thing is often companies that have that, it's a bit separate from the user experience. So I've never seen a company that has kind of grown and said, hey, let's take our UX group and now we're going to make them responsible for customer experience. Okay. They tend to be independent, and sometimes, unfortunately, they're a bit disconnected. Yeah. I like to describe this as, the product experience is certainly a big part of the customer experience, but there are other things that are part of the customer experience. Who do I call on the phone, and what's the experience like working with them? And even like, how do I get my invoices? What do my invoices look like? When I have a problem, how does that get handled? If I have an account manager, all those sorts of things, I think. And I see a lot of UX people sometimes talk about the customer experience like, we want to make our job bigger. And I think, again, they don't realize all those different touch points. It's like, there's the experience of using the product, but especially for enterprise software, the experience of using the product is an important part, but there are a lot of other things that influence whether someone's going to buy or someone's going to renew beyond just the experience of the product. And I think that's really where customer experience comes in.
Interesting. Well, listen, Jeff, I want to respect your time here. So let's leave those 3 topics there. Hopefully you and I will have a chance to do this again and maybe drill into some of these in a little more detail. So, a final question that I like to ask all of my guests, Jeff. You've been doing this for a long time and writing about it for a long time. Knowing what you know now and having learned what you've learned, if you were to go back, let's say 10 to 15 years, and give some advice to the 10 to 15 year younger Jeff Lash, advice for product management or business in general, what advice would you give and why?
So besides some stock tips, I think one of the things that I think I recognized 10 or 15 years ago was that a lot of success and a lot of, not just personal success, but kind of organizational success is relationship building and kind of those interpersonal soft sort of skills. And I think I realized that, but I think if there's anything, I'd have to go back and say, just kind of emphasize that, it's funny. I've seen organizations where they've got, good intellectual property and they've got smart people and good technical skills, but the kind of interpersonal relationships are really, get in the way. Mm-hmm. So, I think, a lot of people talk about, the soft skills of product management, right? It's not just, you can write a business case and do a bit of analysis, but part of it is, how do you orchestrate all these different people within the organization? How do you, convince executives to fund your thing? How do you convince salespeople that your product is important enough for them to pay attention to it, even if they can hit quota without selling it? I think all those sort of things, and not just for personal success, but also I think just for the ability to kind of create a good output at the end of the day. I think, I think I recognize that and I put some emphasis on it, but I think I would just reinforce that and maybe start working on it a little bit earlier.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a good one, because you're right. You can have all those other pieces, but without that, you're not going to get very far. So before we wrap up, Jeff, if somebody's listening to this and wants to hear more, or has maybe a follow-up question for you or something, can you share any contact information you're comfortable sharing? And also, because you're such a strong voice for the community, let us know of any events that you've got coming up in 2016 that you're attending or speaking at. Anything you're comfortable sharing in terms of contact and where people might see you in the wild, quote unquote, in the coming year?
Sure, absolutely. So I got a couple ways. So the good product, how to be a good product manager blog, I'm still posting there. So that's goodproductmanager.com, and you can read all the archive posts, and there's a contact page there as well if you want to get in touch. I'm on Twitter, and I interact with people on Twitter a lot. My handle is @Jeff Lash. That's JEFFLASH. I will probably be at some product camps next year. I haven't figured out the exact schedule yet. I'm one of the people who helps coordinate the product camp in St. Louis. That is going to be on February 27th. It has grown tremendously over the past few years, so I will definitely be there. And we last year we actually had people coming from Kansas City and Minneapolis and Nashville and a whole bunch of other places. So we've already got the registration form signed up there, and but I'll probably be at some other ones in the spring as well. And then probably the other big event to let people know about is an annual conference that Serious Decisions puts on called the Serious Decisions Summit. It's an annual event, and it's going to be May 24th through 27th in Nashville. So you can go to our website, seriousdecisions.com. That's SIRIUS decisions.com. And there's some information on the summit. We've got a ton of great presentations lined up focusing on product management, but also all the other areas that we cover as a company. So product marketing, portfolio marketing, demand creation, channel marketing, channel sales, sales enablement, sales operations, a whole bunch of different areas. So it's a great opportunity to network. We're expecting, I think, 2,000 plus B2B product marketing and sales leaders there. We'll have a guest keynote and client presentations as well. And I'll be there, and we'll be unveiling some of our new research at that event as well.
That's amazing. That's amazing. And if you could shoot over to me that link that you were mentioning as well, Jeff, I'll definitely put that in the post. It was around the evaluation tool of deciding between the product manager and the product owner. I think was what we were
absolutely. Yeah, and there's actually a couple others. I'll send those over, and I'll link to this information on the summit and all that sort of stuff as well.
Awesome. So Jeff, on behalf of Ready Product Radio and our listeners, I'd like to thank you for taking the time. You're definitely one of the strong voices in product management and have been for many years. So this has been a real treat for me, and I'm hoping we can do it again sometime in 2016.
Absolutely. Well, thanks for the opportunity, and I appreciate it. I enjoyed myself, and nice talking with you as well.
Okay. Thanks, Jeff. Today's podcast was brought to you by Under 10 Consulting. Get your product teams up to speed quickly with the latest methods and a proven process tailored to your organization. Thank you for listening to this episode of Ready Product Radio, part of the Ready PDM network. This is when most podcasters ask you to leave a review on iTunes if you like the show. My only request is if you found the show entertaining, inspiring, or informative, please share it with a colleague or friend who may feel the same way. Also, note that the views expressed in this episode do not necessarily reflect my views or the views of the Ready PDM network. If you want yourself or your product to be ready, then keep your eyes on your markets, your ears to your customers, your mind on their experiences, both good and bad, and finally, keep your hearts on your products. Until next time, thank you for listening. You can contact us on Twitter at Ready Product Radio. That's RDYPRODUCTRADIO. And on the web at www.readyproductradio.com.
Hey, Ray, what do you want to do tonight?
The same thing we do every night, Pinky. Try to take over the world.
You're still here? It's over. Go home. Go.